My name's Paul Coudray. I just want to thank everyone for welcome and thank everybody for joining the webinar today. It's a bit of a new experience for me, this as well, and so obviously technology is the future, as they say. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen in terms of the webinar. Just to let you know to start off with that the webinar itself will be recorded and it will be uploaded onto the website by next week. The audio is automatically muted by us from this end. You'll notice at the top of your screen is a green tab. If you've got any questions, if you select the chat box, and please also make sure that the questions go to all panelists. And we'll go over any questions at the end of the webinar, but if anything comes up that is pertinent as we go through the session, then we'll come to that straight away. So, as I say, my name's Paul Coudray. The title of the webinar is Who's in Charge of the Future? Developing the Next Generation of Ambulance Commanders. I'm not going to dazzle you with any science or anything like that. I'm just going to talk through the session, treat it more of a discussion to raise the subject, raise awareness and generate some of that opportunity for us to collectively think ahead and to hopefully change some of the thinking and encourage some creativity between us all. The session itself the slides should last for around about 25 minutes or so, 30 minutes, with obviously then some time to ask some questions as we go through. So, the session, as I say, is Who's in Charge of the Future, and you'll know I've tried to be a little bit clever there by showing you a picture of somebody that you can't see the face of. That's about my level of humour. What I'm going to do in terms of the session is go through the background, where we are today, how we've got to today, the current situation in terms of what the capabilities are, the challenges and demands of those expectations, and some recommendations that, in my opinion, I think we could hopefully try and collectively try and change some of that future in the way of thinking. And as we say, some time for thinking at the end. Okay, so who am I to have an opinion? I'm not going to go through all of my list of achievements as it says, but basically the session is itself, as you read some of those things that I've done. I'm quite proud of the fact that I've been in the ambulance service for 31 and a half years. I'll be 32 in November. I started as a cadet when I was 16, so I have progressed through the whole range of duties, and I've seen quite a lot of changes in this period of time. The last 10 years, though, I've spent in the resilience field, and it's been I was going to say probably there, but I'm actually going to be more definite about it and more positive to say it's been the best 10 years of my career because of the opportunities and the people I've worked with and the opportunities we've had to change some of the thinking and make better capabilities. I've experienced quite a lot of major incidents in the past. And I've chaired some of those work streams that have allowed us to put in place better capabilities, including the first ever command and control guidance for the ambulance service. We influenced national occupational standards, and we've also developed quite recently a Health Service Commanders Award, which is about setting the future qualification. And some of those things we'll talk about as we go through the session. I've put in bold there as, do I think I'm a leader? I guess it's always one of those questions that I have with my team when we talk about leadership qualities and how we change some of the things for the better. But hopefully as we go through the session today, we can collectively lead on some of those things that we need to put in place to make a better future. In terms of my background, again, I'm not going to read through everything that it says there. I'm going to allow you to read that as we go through. But in essence, what I will hopefully be able to demonstrate there is that from a subject point of view, it's what I've observed over the ambulance service in my career, what I know, what I think, what other people have talked to me about. So what I hear is just as important in terms of how we can change and show some of those transformational leader traits that we need to do in terms of putting in place better things for the future for the public. I think what's key on there as well is this second to the last bullet point about public and professional expectation. At the end of the day, I'm a member of the public. We're members of the public that are on the webinar, but we're also professionals in terms of what do we expect, what do we want for the public, what do we want for ourselves, and what do we want in terms of professionalism, in terms of taking things forward. So I hope that I'm able to demonstrate there that I've got some subject knowledge in terms of what we're doing, and in terms of leadership is about us all being empowered to change some of those things for the future. Okay, so we're just going to go into the background of Ambulance Commander development in terms of where we are today. I think you'll agree, obviously, historically we can go back as long as records were there in terms of incidents and events within the UK and also abroad, whether they're major incidents or whether they're big events. We've seen the rise of public mass gathering events over the last few years because they're becoming more and more popular. In terms of, so there's always a need there in terms of the demand to have a command and control structure in place. In terms of the ambulance service commander development, I think management as a role was always seen as progression and ambition. I can personally speak from my own point of view, as I say, going back to my career, when you started in the ambulance service or the health service or whatever public sector organisation you're in, everybody's different. Some people will be comfortable and happy in terms of staying where they are, but some people will have natural abilities and they'll want to progress and they'll want to step up the ladder, so to speak, and to progress on and to be ambitious, and they'll go for promotion in terms of roles. And also over those years, and we've all had the same, we've all had role models that we've looked at, whether they're good role models or whether they're bad role models, but we've had those as our benchmarks really, and we've been able to look ahead and say, I want to be that person, I want to be like that person. From a Maslow's point of view, I want to have what those people have got, and that's just a natural humanistic approach to things. What we've also seen is promotion in those days, or in the past, has always been seen as included pay progression. And that's an interesting factor in terms of some of the things that we'll come on to in a bit about pay in the health service. In terms of what we've said there about agenda for change, and but essentially, most people who are currently in the ambulance service who are in command roles or management roles, if you look at the profile, most of those people, including myself, started their career pre-paramedics and the clinical advancements that go on today. Over the last 10 years or so, we've had the introduction of the Civil Contingencies Act, and we've also had, obviously, the Agenda for Change programme within the NHS, which put in better terms and conditions for people who worked in the health service. But what's also included, if we look back, in that 10 years, and we look at the Civil Contingencies Act as a benchmark, for those that remember, the 1980s was described as a decade of disaster because we had really high profile major incidents and tragedies, whether they were, to name but a few, the Manchester Airport fire, Hillsborough, obviously, which is very topical still at the moment, the Bradford fire, Zeebrugge. So we've had a number of incidents and events over that last 10 years, and we've also had, if you look back, what I would describe as the last 10 years of a decade of capability, where some of those capabilities that we've got across the country, not just in the ambulance service, but as multi-agency, have certainly improved and have been enhanced, whether that's been generated not solely by the Civil Contingencies Act, but also by learning from incidents and being held more to account about what we have done and what we could have done before those incidents actually took place. And looking ahead, as I say, we've got Agenda for Change, which was brought in, and that has an impact in terms of the ambulance service. But looking ahead to those next 10 years, we're going to have another period of change. So there's going to be a decade of change as we look at things like the cost improvement pressures, look at the models of delivery in the ambulance service, and look at those challenges ahead that we're going to face, and we'll talk about as we go through some of these slides. But there's what I would describe as a decade of opportunity as well to put things in place that will be a little bit, will hopefully be better for us in the future. And I think we've got an obligation and a duty to do those, and now's the time for us to be looking at those things. So, as I said, some of this that we're going to talk through isn't rocket science. It's designed to make us think. And some of these things you may think, well, so what? Why are you telling us this? I knew that. We know that already. But I'd rather at the end of us think, okay, maybe I knew that, but maybe I didn't think about it that particular way, or maybe I didn't realise we could do something about it in terms of going forward. So some of those things that drive us obviously today, as we've talked about there, is the legislation and the duty of care. We've got legislation that has been in place for a period of time, whether that includes the Health and Safety at Work Act, obviously Human Rights Act in terms of Article 2 with the right to life has a big bearing on what we do, not just multi-agency wise, but from an ambulance service point of view, because the doing nothing isn't an option anymore. Again, we've had lessons identified in the past and things that come up from what was the Rule 43, was replaced obviously by that Coroners and Justice Act of 2009, where we now have reports and action to prevent further deaths or future deaths. So we need to make sure that we do identify those lessons and we put something in place in terms of going forward. The Health and Social Care Act obviously links in with what we do in those other pieces of legislation. But again, going back to what we talked about before about public expectation, what do I expect as a member of the public? What should we expect as a member of the public when there's a time of crisis, and making sure that there's no gap between the perception of risk or the perception of what we provide is right for what the public want in a time of their crisis. And ultimately as well, we're professionals, so we've got that professional accountability, not just to think of today and to do the job today, but to influence and try and use our experience now to put something better in place for the future. So the legislation is obviously a driver in terms of what we need to do, or holds us to account as to what we do. But equally, at the end of the day, this is about a duty of care and our obligation to take things forward. So in terms of the current situation, who is in charge now? Well, as I explained before in terms of specifics to the ambulance service, generally it's somebody with a clinical background, somebody who's come through those ranks, and the capability covers at an operational, a tactical and a strategic level of command. And this is just in a command role. Obviously we've got day-to-day jobs in terms of internal NHS pressures, the day job, staff management, hospital pressure issues, everything that you would expect to be in place in terms of a modern day NHS ambulance service. And from a command and control point of view, we're very much focused on modern way of thinking as well. The JESUP, the Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Programme, has changed some of that thinking across those three blue light emergency services about them working together better to save lives. But from a general point of view, commanders who are currently in place now at those operational, tactical and strategic levels have been promoted originally into management positions. So they are assessed as being competent or ready for a management role. And then what comes with that management role is the need to be a commander at an incident or event. So they work on a day-to-day basis. We're experiencing the high pressure and activity and the demands that are going on that are increasing on a day-to-day basis. So there's a management need to be there in terms of staff management, in terms of all the logistical things that take place. But there's also evidence as well when we look around of non-clinically background personnel in command and control roles as the organisations have evolved. We've had people who have come into the service who have not been operational, whether that was as a technician or whether that was as a paramedic. People have come in with similar transferable skills who've come into the health service, and there are arguments. Some people, again, depending on where their backgrounds are from, will say you should have a clinical background to be a clinical manager. Some will argue it's not really necessary. At the end of the day, it's about the right people with the right key skills to do that particular role. In terms of qualifications to be in charge, what qualifies them to be in charge today? Well, obviously we'll go through basic training and management training in terms of developing people as they go through and getting people ready to step up to their next career path. We've got internal major incident training that takes place and is aligned to the Civil Contingencies Act, which gives us a duty to make sure that the responders are trained. There's a bit of across the country still. People talk about MIMS or major incident medical management and support, which has been in place for quite a number of years and has been very helpful in the development of health service response to dealing with major incidents. But again, what this is about is determining what is the right qualifications for commanders going forward in the future. There's still a perception or a belief that MIMS training is the qualification that people need to do in terms of going forward. So there's what's known as anchoring around, this is how we've always done it, this has always been suitable for us going forward in the future. In terms of chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear, or CBRN, there's the traditional gold, silver, bronze courses. There's the magic courses, which is the multi-agency gold incident command courses, which are for gold level or strategic level, whether they're new or whether they're developing or whether they're experienced. We've also got national occupational standards and continual professional development records, and our records in terms of what we need to do and demonstrate in terms of that we're competent and we're maintaining that competence to still be in charge. And obviously that's blended in with academic study and achievement from a day-to-day basis to make sure that there's quality in the management of the ambulance service in terms of going forward. This is quite interesting in terms of some capability in numbers. Back in 2009, there was a survey which took place by the National Ambulance Emergency Preparedness Board, which looked at the 11 ambulance trusts when we were undertaking a training needs analysis program to look at shaping what did we need in terms of which ultimately resulted in the first National Ambulance Service Command and Control Guidance and that adoption of the National Occupational Standards. But at the time, that survey showed that what the ambulance services were reporting was that they had those number of capability across the country. 99 strategic or goal level commanders, 198 tactical commanders, and 585 operational commanders of different levels. So we knew where we had, what capability we had at that particular time. But by comparison, if you look at the 2014 Jessup figures as a plane goes overhead, so I apologise if you can pick that up. On the register at the moment shows that tactical commanders across the UK, we've got 796 and 1,275 operational commanders. And that the figures obviously for Jessup look specifically at tactical and operational. It doesn't include strategic in those figures. So if we look at those a little bit more simpler on a table in terms of what that capability has been, and you can clearly see, hopefully there at the bottom, that there's been an increase in those levels quite considerably in terms of where we were in 2009 and where we are in 2014. So the capability is there, and we need to look a little bit more as to what does that actually represent in terms of quality. So in terms of what do the figures suggest? Well, quite obviously there's an increase in capability, but we also have to challenge whether those original figures in that survey were correct at the time as to what was actually being reported. That there's a natural, real positive step forward in terms of the increase of numbers and the capability, and that's a real benefit of the Jessup programme. But as we said at the start of this particular slide, What about the quality? Has the quality really improved? Does the Jessup numbers help us develop the future? It certainly helps us work more closely with the other emergency services in terms of working together to save lives. But there's also a risk that people will think there's a perception that Jessup is the answer, not because we've got Jessup now. That means that everybody is trained and everybody is ready and competent, and we only need to do Jessup when it's done. And that there isn't really a problem there. But we have to ask those questions, and in terms of going back to what we said right at the beginning about thinking with a little bit more vision about being transformational and being more creative, we have to make sure that we do identify or look closely, is there a problem? And how can we use the Jessup program and that initiative to maybe generate a little bit more interest in being a commander in the ambulance service? So the perceived challenges ahead of the current system, well, what is quite obvious in terms of when you look across the country, and we said before about people that have come in and have had a career path and they've stepped up or gone through the ranks, suggests that those age profiles and the demographics are pretty similar in terms of age group and experience. So if we look ahead and we be more visionary and we look ahead to the future, and we talked about that decade of opportunity ahead, there's a risk of experienced commanders all leaving at the same time in the future, whether that's through retirement or whether that's through redundancy or whether that is through seeking opportunities elsewhere, whether that's in the private sector or a new career path altogether. And the dead man's shoes type scenario is there because there's not really a great deal of opportunity to bring through the next generation alongside the experienced commanders, because there's not a lot of slack in the system to make sure that we can build that capacity in terms of going forward. So another challenge of the current system is obviously as we lose people, we lose experienced staff. What we've also got to look at in terms of, does the current system that we've got now, will that fit the future models of delivery in the future, as the ambulance service may move towards more of a hear and treat model, or a see and treat model, or what will those challenges and demands be for the future? We talked before about the terms and conditions being a challenge, because what Agenda for Change did do was it does create a problem in respect of a motivational factor for clinicians at the top of their field who are talented, who are able to demonstrate that they're very good at clinical work, that they're very good at academic study, that they're very good at putting into practice what they need to do. But there can be a demotivating factor there, because of the Agenda for Change program might mean that to step into that first level of management, there's a drop in pay. Now that drop in pay might be because they're no longer required to do unsocial hours. What people will see is they'll automatically see the losing pay. They're not getting 25% anymore. What they won't see in the first instance is they're not getting 25% additional pay because they're not required to do those unsocial hours. You think of the Maslow's theory, as we talked about briefly before. This will come down to people's perceptions of what do they want and what do they need at this particular time of their career. So we may not really be attracting the talented people into management roles because we haven't really got a good career choice for people to go down, because of the development over those last 10, 15 years or so has been more towards the clinical end and a little bit less towards the management role, because we've had competent and experienced commanders in place and managers in place for a long period of time. So we need to recognise that there is a problem in terms of the current system. If we don't do anything about the current system, there will come a tipping point where people will go off the end of the conveyor belt, and we won't really be ready to replace them with the right people who have been developed at the right time. So in terms of, is there anything wrong with what we've currently got now? Well, if we look at the positives, we've got a really good track record of incident and event management. We've got experienced commanders, as we've talked about. We've got new developments and new facilities. The NARU, the National Ambulance Resilience Unit, is a centre of excellence in terms of what it's developing and what it can do and what it's achieved. And we've got a real better understanding of public expectation and legislation, what we're expected to do, how we're going to be governed, and why we should do what we need to do. But with every positive, there's always some negatives there, but we need to use those negatives to help influence the opportunity going forward. We know we've got lessons identified which have shown we could do things better. We've got greater opportunities to learn from incidents in terms of going forward, and we'll have to demonstrate that with that scrutiny in terms of assurance checks, core standards around the NHS Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response core standards, or the EPRR core standards. And we've also got to look ahead and think the Civil Contingencies Act has not yet really been fully tested. I think it's quite obvious that the next big major incident, wherever that will be, because the risk will still remain the same out in the environment of an incident happening of some time. The Civil Contingencies Act and what's been put in place over this period of time will be challenged further. So we'll have to demonstrate that we've learnt those lessons and we've put better capabilities in place. There isn't, as we said before, a clear, real structure in terms of a programme for developing commanders and managers of the future. We've started some of those programmes, but for somebody coming into the ambulance service, we're not very good at this particular time of saying, you're coming into the ambulance service now, these are the career choices you can make. You can go down the clinical route, which is what you've been brought into, and that level that you're coming into at the start of your career. And whether that's in a university environment or whether that's within the ambulance service, we don't necessarily say at this particular time. But there's a management structure as well that we need to develop, and this is the programme that you could go to in the future if you demonstrate those abilities or those desires to go down that route. As we've said also about the current lack of a qualification or no definitive standard of benchmark to say this is the starting model that we need people to do before they step into a management role. We've talked for a while and with my team for a long time about if you look at the police as an example where they have a sergeant's exam before somebody goes into being a sergeant, they won't be allowed to apply for a sergeant's role until they've completed those sergeant's examination or even going on to an inspector level one. In the ambulance service at the moment, we've never really had that, and we've never really had the capacity to do that. But that doesn't mean to say that's what we should always have. We need to look ahead to the future, because otherwise, as we say there in the second to the last bullet point, at the moment, are we currently just carrying on fixing the today, or are we really building for the future and looking ahead and look around us and say, as the title of the session says, about where are those next generation of commanders coming from? Where's the talent, and how are we developing that talent in the right way? So in terms of the future leaders in the current capabilities, well, ask the question is, have we got a talent management program in place? Do we develop managers, but in that management program, have we got sufficient elements of command and control built into that program? The academic programs is quite an interesting, the academy program is quite an interesting point, because when I looked at the NHS Leadership Academy program, when we were putting the Health Service Commanders Award program together, currently the NHS Leadership Academy program doesn't mention the Civil Contingencies Act, which is quite strange this day and age when future NHS leaders are being developed, but we don't really understand or take on the responsibility or understand the responsibility they've got under those duties around that particular legislation. We've got to make sure as well that that's the same for ambulance service command. We've got to develop management skills, but we've also got to do command development at the same time. And although they have similar skill sets, they are different in a different environment. We've got issues obviously around about the capacity to develop, because as we know in the ambulance service, it's very busy. There's not a lot of slack periods, or there's not a lot of period to develop new people in terms of this particular subject that we're doing. So we've got to lead as we are now, but we've got to inspire those future commanders. And we talked about leadership right at the beginning. Are we inspiring the next generation to come through to take forward that mantle and to be the managers of their own generation? Because they're a different generation to the generation that was there when people who've come through those command and control roles now from when they started. And there's always this challenge in terms of promotion and progression versus the salary, which is a real challenge in terms of going forward. But we've got to make sure that people see it as more of a positive step in terms of that progression. So building a better future and being transformational leaders together collectively as we are. What we need to do is to essentially make sure that we recognise the problem, that there is a problem there for now. We're doing this webinar on a day of industrial action from the public sector. And some of those things around about shortages of people, whether they're teachers in the future, is one of the discussion and moot points that's being talked about at the moment. There's a danger that if we don't do something about it now, we'll have that failure of foresight in the future over this next 10, 15 years or so. We need to make sure as well that we can influence the NHS Leadership Academy programmes around what those duties of the Civil Contingencies Act and the NHS Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response, their programmes require the health service to do, because if we've got leaders within those fields of the NHS, those leaders ultimately will be responsible in some part to commissioning work or services for provider services going forward. So we've got to educate people at the top and make sure it stays on the agenda. And there's the potential to develop a National Academy programme, and I talked before about the National Ambulance Resilience Unit being a centre of excellence. We've got a capability there that we can help build that better future, not just fix the today, although the today obviously does need servicing. But we've got opportunities that we can look ahead and make sure that we put a programme in place that is adapted or adopted as the one model that we're going to have for going forward for managers at operational, tactical and strategic level for the ambulance service and in going forward. There's no reason as well why we can't adopt the National Occupational Standards for Commanders into the Health and Care Professions Council. As registered paramedics, we've got a duty to maintain continual professional development, but it's not aligned to our duties under the HCPC at the moment. And if we're going to make it a career choice for people, then why not? Is the question I would ask. Let's put something in place so people get those rewards back in the future, because ultimately there will be transferable skills. And we've got to make being a commander a career path. We've got to attract the right people with the right skills for the future. And I think the final point is around using the opportunities that we've got now to mentor and encourage the development of those next generation alongside the experienced people we've got now. That's why we've got them in place, and not just wait until it's too late and then try and replace them as they leave the service. So we've got opportunities now to make sure that whether they're big events or big incidents, that we can bring through some of those new people so they can understand why those decisions are being made, and we can help then develop that future capability. So in essence, really that's my slides and my observations in terms of the current position, in terms of what we've talked about. We've talked about the background around about the current situation, the recommendations. So now we've got an opportunity to answer any questions that people may have. Just as a reminder, we will be uploading and recording the webinar early next week, so please, if anybody's got any questions, they can send those to the via the chat box to all panelists. That would be helpful. Okay, so if anybody's got any questions, if they want to use the chat box, in essence, what I'd just like to say, and while we're waiting for some questions to come in, is really is to look ahead, as we've said about there will be a change in the future in terms of how the services are how their models of delivery are. So there will be a decade of change, and that's obvious, and we can clearly see that that's happening now around us. But we also have to use that time as a decade of opportunity for people and the talented people that are around within the ambulance service and within the health service to try and look ahead, realise the position that we're in now, not consider it to be such a bad position because we've got experienced commanders and managers around, but will those experienced commanders be around forever? And the answer to that is no. But we need to make sure that, well, we've got a chance and we've got a duty to try and help develop them coming through, make it attractive to them, inspire them to come through and see that there is a career in the management side of the ambulance service. Okay, so we're just going to end the webinar there as there's been no questions. So thanks very much for joining, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.